I didn't go looking for it. That's the thing I need you to understand before anything else. I wasn't snooping, wasn't suspicious, wasn't playing detective in my own marriage. I was simply reaching across the nightstand for my own phone in the dark, at 2 a.m, when my hand landed on his instead. The screen lit up with the movement, and in the half-second before I set it back down, I saw a notification preview that changed everything. 4 words. That's all it was. 4 words on a glowing screen in a dark bedroom, and in that moment, 11 years of marriage rearranged themselves into something I didn't recognize. My name is Rebecca, and this is the story of the night I discovered that the life I'd been living wasn't entirely real. Let me take you back to the beginning, because this story doesn't make sense without the foundation. And the foundation, for a long time, was genuinely beautiful. I met Nathan at 23, at a mutual friend's birthday dinner that I almost didn't attend. I'd been exhausted from a long week at work. I was a junior graphic designer at a small branding agency, putting in long hours and loving every minute of it, and I'd nearly texted my friend to cancel. Something made me go anyway. I still don't know whether to be grateful for that impulse or not. Nathan was seated across the table from me. He was 30 at the time, a civil engineer with quiet confidence and a dry sense of humor that I found immediately compelling. He wasn't loud or showy. He didn't try to command the table the way some men do. He just listened, observed, and when he finally spoke, what he said was worth hearing. We talked for most of the evening. By the end of the night, he'd asked for my number. By the end of the week, we'd had our first date. By the end of the month, we were inseparable. What I loved most about Nathan, in those early years, was his steadiness. I came from a chaotic family, a mother who struggled with anxiety, a father who worked constantly and was emotionally absent, a childhood full of unpredictability. Nathan was the opposite of all that. He was calm, reliable, present. He did what he said he would do. He showed up when he said he would show up. In a life that had felt unstable for as long as I could remember, Nathan felt like solid ground. We dated for 3 years before he proposed. Not because we were uncertain about each other, but because we were both deliberate people who didn't rush. The proposal happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening, no elaborate staging, no restaurant or crowd. He simply cooked dinner at his apartment, poured wine, and sat across from me and said he couldn't imagine his life without me in it. Then he opened a small box. It was exactly right. It was exactly him. We married in September, outdoors, with 40 people we actually liked. Nothing extravagant. Just the people who mattered, in a place that was beautiful, saying things we meant. My friend Sarah cried through the entire ceremony. Nathan's best friend Tom gave a speech that made everyone laugh and then, unexpectedly, cry. I remember standing in the reception tent that evening, holding Nathan's hand, watching our friends and family dance, and thinking, this is it. This is the feeling people spend their whole lives looking for. This right here. We built our life carefully and contentedly. We bought a house when I was 31, a Victorian fixer-upper that we spent 2 years renovating with our own hands, weekends full of paint samples and plumbing disasters, and arguments about crown molding that dissolved into laughter. Nathan was meticulous about the structural work, I handled the aesthetics. We were good together that way, complementary, each trusting the other's expertise. We had a daughter, Lily, when I was 33. She arrived at the beginning of spring, and immediately became the most important thing in both of our lives. Nathan was an extraordinary father from the very first night, patient, attentive, willing to get up for the 3 a.m. feeding without complaint. Watching him with Lily, this calm and steady man holding our tiny daughter with such careful tenderness, I fell in love with him all over again. By the time Lily was 2, I'd left the agency and started my own branding studio from home, which allowed me to work around her schedule. Nathan's career had progressed steadily, He'd made project lead at his firm, was managing a significant infrastructure project, was well respected in his field. We were both doing work we found meaningful. We had a house we loved, a daughter who made us laugh every day, a community of friends and neighbors who felt like family. From the outside, it looked perfect. And from the inside, for a long time, it felt perfect too. The first shift I noticed was subtle. So subtle that I barely registered it at the time, filed it away as a passing phase, a rough patch at work, stress from the project he was managing. Nathan started working late more often. Not dramatically late, he'd be home by 8 or 9 instead of 6, apologetic, tired, distracted. He'd eat dinner, help me put Lily to bed, and then disappear into his home office for another hour or two. His phone, which he'd always left casually on the kitchen counter or the coffee table, started living in his pocket. I notice these things the way you notice a low-grade headache. It's there, it's mildly unpleasant, but you're busy and it doesn't seem serious enough to investigate. I told myself he was stressed about the project. I made sure he had time to decompress when he got home. I took on more of the household and childcare responsibilities to ease his load. Looking back, I was doing what partners do when they love someone, adjusting, accommodating, making room. What I wasn't doing was asking the direct questions. What I wasn't doing was trusting the low-grade discomfort as information. The second shift happened about 4 months before the night of the phone. Nathan started going to the gym in the evenings, 2 or 3 times a week. He'd never been particularly fitness-focused before. He played tennis on weekends with Tom, stayed generally active, but wasn't someone who went to the gym regularly. I thought it was positive. Stress relief. I encouraged it. He lost weight. Bought new clothes. Started getting his hair cut more often, at a nicer place than the neighborhood barbershop he'd gone to for years. I told myself he was reinventing himself at 38. Mid-career revitalization, taking care of himself. I even said, one evening when he came home looking particularly well, "You look great lately. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." He smiled and said thanks, and something moved across his face that I couldn't quite read, and I didn't try. I didn't try because I didn't want to find what was there. On some level, I think I knew. On some level, we always know. But knowing and acknowledging are different countries, and you can live in the border territory for a very long time if you're motivated to stay there. The night of the phone was a Thursday in November. Lily had been up twice already with a cold, and I'd settled her back to sleep around midnight. Nathan had been asleep when I'd gotten up, and asleep when I returned. Or so I thought. I reached across the nightstand for my phone to check the time. My hand landed on his instead. The screen lit up. And there, in the notification preview, were 4 words. "Miss you already." I froze. My hand on his phone, the screen glowing, those 4 words burning into my retinas. 4 words that could mean nothing. That could be a friend, a colleague, a family member. Nathan had a cousin named Andrew. He had a work contact named Alex. 4 words that had 1,000 innocent explanations. But not at 2:17 in the morning. Not with those words. Not with the way my body responded to them, that immediate, visceral drop in my stomach, that feeling like the floor had tilted. I set the phone back on the nightstand and lay in the dark for a long time. My heart was hammering. Nathan was breathing steadily next to me. Lily was quiet down the hall. The house was exactly as it always was. And nothing was the same. I didn't sleep again that night. I lay in the dark and ran inventory, all the things I'd noticed and filed away and not examined. The phone in the pocket. The late nights. The gym. The new clothes. The thing I couldn't read on his face when I told him he looked great. At 5 a.m., I got up carefully, went downstairs, and made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table and tried to think clearly, which was like trying to build furniture in a hurricane. I didn't want to believe it. Of course I didn't. 11 years, a daughter, a house we'd renovated with our own hands, a marriage I'd believed in completely. I didn't want any of that to be a lie. But I also knew, with a clarity that was almost clinical, that I couldn't unknow what I'd seen. That the question was now open, whether I wanted it to be or not. And that the choice I made in the next few days would determine everything. I could confront him immediately. I could ask him directly what the message meant. I could put all the cards on the table and force the conversation. Or I could find out the truth first. Not to build a case, not to catch him, but because I had 11 years of trusting this man's account of reality. And I needed to know, independently, whether that trust had been earned. I chose to find out first. Over the next 4 days, I paid a different kind of attention. Not paranoid, not obsessive, just clear-eyed and deliberate in a way I hadn't been for months, because I'd been choosing comfort over clarity. I started with what I could observe directly. The late nights at work. On Tuesday of that week, Nathan texted at 5 to say he'd be late, project meeting. I happened to call his direct office line at 7, something I'd never had reason to do before. It went to voicemail. I called his colleague Dan, who had socialized with a few times, on the pretext of confirming a date for a dinner we'd loosely planned. Dan mentioned casually that he hadn't seen Nathan much lately because Nathan had been working mostly off-site. Off-site? Not late at the office. Off-site. That Friday, Nathan said he was going to the gym after work. He didn't come home until 10. That's 2.5 hours for a gym session, for a man who'd been going maybe twice a week for 4 months. Saturday morning, he was in the shower. His phone buzzed on the dresser. I looked at it. A name, Alex from site. A message preview that said simply, "Tonight." Alex from site. I put the phone back down. My hands were steady in a way that surprised me. Maybe because some part of me had already completed the calculation, and the steadiness was shock doing its job. That afternoon, when Nathan was playing with Lily in the backyard, I sat at my desk and did something I've never done before and hope never to do again. I opened his laptop, which he'd left on the kitchen table, to check our family calendar app, something I had access to and reasons to check. And while I was there, I looked at his browser history. I told myself it was the last thing I would do before I confronted him. That I needed one more piece of evidence to overcome the part of my brain that kept generating innocent explanations, the part that loved him and kept insisting there must be another answer. The browser history told me everything. Restaurant reservations. Not ones I knew about. A hotel booking from 6 weeks ago, a boutique place downtown, for a Friday night. A Friday I now remembered clearly because Nathan had told me he was at a conference in the city and would stay over to avoid the drive. I'd sent him off that morning with a packed bag and told him to have a good trip. He'd had a good trip. Just not the kind he'd told me about. There was also a florist order. Delivered to an address I didn't recognize, 3 weeks ago. Peonies and white roses. My wedding flowers had been peonies and white roses. I sat at that kitchen table for 20 minutes while Nathan and Lily laughed in the backyard, while the ordinary sounds of our family life drifted in through the window, and I understood with absolute and devastating certainty that my life contained a version of events I had not been told. I confronted him that evening, after Lily was asleep. I'd spent the intervening hours deciding how to do it. I didn't want to scream, though I understood the impulse. I didn't want to break things or dissolve into tears, though both felt like reasonable responses to what I was holding. What I wanted was the truth. The whole truth, clearly told, without manipulation or management. I sat down at the kitchen table. Nathan was pouring himself a glass of water. Lily's drawings were still on the refrigerator. The house smelled like the pasta we'd had for dinner. I need to talk to you about something, I said. My voice came out calm. I was impressed by my own voice. Sure, he said, turning, water glass in hand, completely unsuspecting. I know about Alex. The water glass didn't fall, but his hand went very still. The color shifted in his face, a draining, almost imperceptible change that told me everything before a single word came out of his mouth. Rebecca. I saw the message on your phone Thursday night. And I looked at your browser history today. The restaurant reservations, the hotel, the flowers. I paused. I need you to tell me the truth. All of it. He sat down slowly across from me, and the look on his face was one I'd never seen before. Not guilt exactly, though guilt was there. Something more complicated. Something almost like relief, which hurt in a particular way I hadn't anticipated. How long? I asked. He looked at the table. 7 months. 7 months. More than half a year of lies. Half a year of good morning kisses and family dinners and helping with Lily's bath, of lying next to me at night, of being my husband and someone else's something at the same time. Who is she? She's an architect on the project I've been managing. Alex is, her name is Alexandra. The gym. The new clothes. The late nights. The conference that wasn't a conference. 7 months of a parallel life, running alongside ours, invisible and constant. Do you love her? The question came out before I'd decided to ask it, and it was the most important question, and I held myself completely still while I waited for the answer. Nathan was quiet for a very long time. In that silence, I could hear the refrigerator humming, a car passing outside, the branch of the oak tree scraping against the upstairs window the way it always did in the wind. I don't know, he said finally. Which was its own kind of answer. Have you been in love with me? These past 7 months. Any of it real? Yes. Rebecca, I promise you, what I feel for you has never been. Don't. The word came out sharper than I intended. Don't tell me what you feel for me and then ask me to believe it tonight. Don't do that. He stopped. I need you to leave tonight, I said. I need you to go to wherever you go. And I need to be alone in this house with our daughter and figure out what I'm doing. Rebecca, please. Can we just talk? We are talking. I asked you to leave. Please leave. He looked at me for a long moment. And then, to his credit, to some minimal credit that I was willing to extend in that moment, he nodded. He stood up. He went upstairs and packed a bag without being asked twice. He came back downstairs and stood in the kitchen doorway looking at me with something I can only describe as profound remorse, though I wasn't ready to let that mean anything yet. I'm sorry, he said. I know that's nothing. But I'm sorry. I know you are, I said. Good night, Nathan. After the door closed, I sat at that kitchen table for a long time. I didn't cry right away. Instead I felt something strange and still, like the moment after a car accident when the adrenaline hasn't hit yet, and you're just sitting in the wreckage, taking stock of what remains. Eventually I did cry. I went upstairs and checked on Lily, sleeping peacefully in her bed with her stuffed elephant tucked under her arm, completely unaware. I stood in her doorway for a long time, watching her breathe. And then I went to my room and sat on my side of the bed, and cried until I didn't have anything left. What followed were the hardest weeks of my life. Nathan was staying with Tom, who called me the next morning to say he was so sorry, that he hadn't known, that he was angry with Nathan on my behalf. I believed him, and I was grateful for the call. I told Cora, my best friend from college, the most fiercely loyal person I've ever known, and she drove 3 hours to be with me that weekend. She sat on my couch and let me cycle through every emotion, fury, grief, disbelief, a dark and horrifying urge to laugh at the absurdity of it, without trying to rush me toward any particular feeling. "What do you want to do?" she asked, not the first day, but the third, when I'd had enough sleep to think. "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "I need to understand it better before I know what I want to do about it." "You don't owe anyone a decision on a timeline." "I know. But I have a daughter. I have a life that involves him. I can't just sit in limbo forever." "You can sit in limbo for a while. That's what limbo is for." I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Okafor, who specialized in relationship trauma. My first session was essentially me sitting across from her and describing the previous 10 days in a flat, almost emotionless voice, and then suddenly crying in a way that seemed to surprise even me. "What's making you cry right now?" she asked gently. "I keep thinking about the peonies," I said. He ordered peonies for her. Peonies were my wedding flowers. Does he not know that? Does he not remember? Or does he remember and he just didn't care? Which of those possibilities is harder to sit with? If he doesn't remember, then I was already gone. Already erased. And if he does remember, and he ordered them anyway? I shook my head. I don't know which is worse. Dr. Okafor helped me understand something in those early sessions that I hadn't yet articulated to myself. That what I was experiencing wasn't just the discovery of an affair. It was a fundamental disruption of my sense of reality. For 7 months, I had been living inside a story that was only partially true. Every memory from those 7 months, every dinner, every morning, every moment of ordinary family life, now had a layer underneath it that I hadn't known existed. "It's not just betrayal," she said. "It's disorientation. The ground you were standing on was real, but it also had a hidden architecture you didn't know about. That's deeply destabilizing. It's why people say they feel like they don't know what's real anymore." "I keep going through memories and trying to identify the lie in them," I told her. "Like if I look carefully enough, I'll find the moment where it shows. Where the fake thing is visible." "And do you find it?" "Sometimes I think I do. A look I didn't understand at the time. A moment when he seemed distracted or guilty or too careful. But I can't be sure if I'm actually finding things, or if I'm retrofitting the narrative now that I know the ending." "That uncertainty is part of the grief," she said. "You may never be able to perfectly distinguish what was real from what was performed. But I want to offer you something. The love you felt was real, regardless of what was happening on his side. Your experience of your marriage was genuine. You weren't living a lie, you were living your truth inside a situation that had more going on than you knew." That distinction mattered to me. I've returned to it many times since. Nathan and I began talking, carefully and awkwardly, about what had happened and what we were going to do. He was transparent in a way I hadn't expected, willing to answer questions I asked, without deflecting or minimizing. He'd ended things with Alexandra immediately after the night I confronted him, and while I had no way to verify this, something in how he spoke about it made me believe him. He told me about how the affair had started. "The thing about that," I said, during one of those conversations, "is that emotional intimacy with someone you're attracted to, that you're keeping secret from your spouse, is already a betrayal. Before anything physical happens. You know that, right?" "I know," he said. "I know now. I think I knew then too, and I chose not to. Why didn't you come to me when things started feeling complicated? Before it became what it became?" This was the question I kept returning to. Not the affair itself, as devastating as it was, but the choice at the beginning, the moment when he could have said, "My marriage needs attention, I'm feeling something I shouldn't feel, we need to talk." The choice he made instead. He struggled to answer this, and his struggling told me something. "I think," he said slowly, during our third or fourth conversation, "that I'd been feeling disconnected for a while. Not unhappy exactly. But like we'd gotten so efficient at our life that we'd stopped, I don't know. Stopped actually seeing each other. It felt easier to find connection somewhere new than to work to find it with you. You could have told me you were feeling disconnected. I know. We could have worked on it. I know. Instead you let me take on extra work and extra childcare to reduce your stress. While you were, I stopped. You let me make things easier for you. While you were doing this. He had no answer to that. There wasn't one. Nathan and I spent 3 months in limbo. He was staying with Tom. He was seeing his own therapist. We were doing the practical things, managing our finances, co-parenting Lily with a careful, painful coordination, while both of us figured out what we wanted. Lily knew her dad was staying at Uncle Tom's for a while. She was 5 and accepted this with the practical resilience of children, though she asked about it sometimes in ways that broke my heart. "Is Daddy coming home?" she'd say at bedtime, and I'd tell her that Daddy loved her very much, and we were figuring things out, and she'd nod seriously like she was 45 years old instead of 5. I considered the possibility of reconciliation. I want to be honest about that, because I think people sometimes expect betrayed spouses to have an immediate and decisive answer, and the truth is more complicated. I loved Nathan. I had 11 years of a life with him. I had a daughter with him. Reconciliation was not a simple no. What made me examine it seriously was the work he was clearly doing. Nathan's therapist, working in coordination with Dr. Okafor at our request, shared observations about his process, that he was genuinely engaging with the question of why he'd made the choices he had, that he wasn't blaming me or minimizing his behavior, that he seemed to understand the depth of what he'd done. "What would reconciliation require from you?" Dr. Okafor asked me. "Complete honesty going forward. Transparency I don't have to ask for, that he gives freely. Him understanding that the work of rebuilding trust is his, not mine, and that it will take years and might never be complete. Him accepting that I might not get there, even if he does everything right. And what would it require from yourself?" I thought about that for a long time. The willingness to live with uncertainty. To accept that the marriage I thought I had is gone, and that whatever comes next would be something new. Not restored, rebuilt. And the honesty to admit if I reach a point where I can't do that anymore. We started couples therapy with a therapist named Dr. Reeves, who was experienced in infidelity recovery and made clear from the first session that his role was not to advocate for the marriage, but to help us figure out what was right for both of us. Those sessions were the hardest conversations I've ever had. Harder than the confrontation night. Harder than the early grief. Because they required me to be honest about things that were painful on multiple sides, my own sense of inadequacy in the wake of the betrayal, the legitimate disconnection Nathan had described, the ways our relationship had grown efficient at the expense of intimacy. I don't want to be misunderstood here. The disconnection in our marriage, whatever its reality, did not cause Nathan's affair. People feel disconnected in marriages. People feel unseen, unappreciated, distant. They work on it, or they ask for help, or in the worst case they end the marriage. They do not secretly build a parallel relationship while allowing their spouse to believe everything is fine. That choice was his, and the responsibility for it was his. But I could hold both truths at once. His responsibility for his choices. And the reality that our marriage had been imperfect in ways I'd been contributing to, ways that were worth examining even if they explained nothing. After 4 months of therapy, individual and joint, I made my decision. I sat across from Nathan in Dr. Reeves's office and told him clearly, I was not ready to reconcile. Not because I had no feeling left, and not because I believed reconciliation was impossible in theory. But because I had examined myself honestly, and I knew that I would spend years waiting for the other shoe to drop. That every business trip, every late night, every phone notification would carry a charge of fear that I wasn't equipped, at this point in my life, to live with. And that a marriage conducted under that kind of constant low-level dread wasn't fair to either of us, and certainly wasn't fair to Lily. Nathan was quiet when I told him. Then he nodded slowly. I understand, he said. And the thing is, I believed him. I think he did understand, and that understanding was its own kind of progress. The man who'd been capable of 7 months of deception had worked hard enough to become capable of hearing this with grace. I want us to co-parent well, I said. Lily deserves 2 parents who are present and loving and not at war with each other. That's what I want to focus on. That's what I want too. We filed for divorce 4 months later. The process was hard but not hostile. We had a mediator instead of opposing attorneys, and we came to agreements about custody and the house and finances without litigation. It was, by the standards of divorce, relatively civil, which I attribute partly to the therapy we'd both done, and partly to the fact that we both understood what was truly at stake. Not the house, not the money. Lily. The divorce was finalized on a Friday afternoon in April. I signed the papers at a conference table with a mediator present and Nathan across from me, and when it was done, we both sat there for a moment in the strange silence of a completed ending. I'm sorry, Nathan said. The same words from the kitchen doorway on the night I asked him to leave. But they meant something different now, at the end of 4 months of real work and real honesty. They meant more. I know, I said. I'm sorry too. For the parts that were mine to be sorry for. We walked out of the building together and parted in the parking lot, and I drove home to my daughter, and my renovated Victorian house, and my branding studio, and my imperfect, complicated, entirely real life. It has been 14 months since that Friday in April. I want to tell you where I am, because I think endings matter, and I think the truth of how people actually rebuild is more useful than a tidied version. The house is mine. I kept it, and Nathan was generous about that. He understood what it meant to me, what we'd put into it. I've redecorated parts of it, slowly, not erasing the history, but layering new things on top. The bedroom is different now. I repainted it myself, a deep slate blue that I love unreservedly, and it feels like mine. Lily is 6 and thriving. She splits her time between my house and the apartment Nathan rented nearby. He deliberately chose a neighborhood close to us so that her life could remain as continuous as possible. He is a good father. Whatever else is true, that has always been true. She loves him and she loves me, and she is, so far as I can tell, secure in both of those loves. I don't take that for granted for a single day. If this story resonated with you, if you've experienced betrayal, if you've had to rebuild your sense of reality after discovering a truth you weren't prepared for, if you've had to learn to stand on your own ground after years of standing on someone else's, you are not alone. Please subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Leave a comment and share your experience if you feel comfortable doing so. This community exists for honest stories, for real emotions, and for the reminder that surviving the worst thing you can imagine is not the end of your story, it's the beginning of a different one. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, the truth, even when it breaks you, is always better than the lie.